for Market podcast.
Just a shout out to anyone out there who looks towards getting draft horses, as Kristin wrote in her first book. An old McCormick Deering adjustable horse cultivator, one row for 2 horses. It did better weed control than almost any tractor implement I'd ever been on in my training, because it's flexible for the sort of heterogeneous production methods that small scale was engendering here. We're not like a razor shaped bed where you can go down with high tech tools. And so given that our lettuces look different as they went down the field, to be able to adjust on the fly the width of your sweeps was something that I didn't have tractor access to. So for those of you that have questions about how it could look on a small place, if you have enough land to graze and make some hay, 2 horses and a 2-horse cultivator can actually reduce labor, which they did for us for many years.
Hello and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing vegetables and flowers for local markets like farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, and local wholesaling. I'm Katie Kulla, your host and a writer for Growing for Market magazine. For 33 years, the magazine for flower and vegetable market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
Harnois Greenhouses has been pioneering greenhouse design since 1965, working alongside market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their mission is simple: supporting growers' success with innovative, high-performance structures engineered for strength, efficiency, and longevity. Designed to withstand high snow and wind loads, their greenhouses optimize brightness, boost yields, and offer a rapid ROI. With over 20,000 projects completed, they're more than just a manufacturer. They're a trusted partner in building sustainable, energy-efficient growing environments. Their NRCS-approved freestanding greenhouse, the Ovaltech, remains a top choice for year-round production. And in 2025, they're introducing a new low-tech high tunnel, starting at just $2 per square foot, perfect for growers seeking an affordable, durable solution. As a Growing for Market listener, you'll receive an exclusive 5% discount on all new structures. Harnois Greenhouses, leading the way in turnkey solutions for local growers. Check them out at harnois.com. That's HARNOIS.com. Newsletters, a necessary evil, right? They take forever to write, and with an average 27% open rate, most of your audience isn't even reading them. No wonder they don't drive more sales. But some CSA farmers are changing that, hitting 80% open rates and turning their emails into revenue-generating machines. On April 11th, join Farmhand and real CSA farmers for a free digital workshop where they'll share the exact strategies they use to turn their newsletters into powerful sales tools. In under an hour, you'll learn the go-to templates and strategies top CSA farmers use to hit 80% plus open rates, how to structure your emails for maximum readability and impact, and real-world success stories from farmers who have leveraged their newsletters to drive sales, boost retention, and strengthen their CSA community. When more members open your emails, they buy more, stay longer, and connect deeper with your farm. Get the secrets and go-to templates for success when you register for the free workshop today at farmhand.partners/newsletter. That's farmhand.partners/newsletter.
Hello, everyone. Today, I am talking with Mark and Kristin Kimball, who own and operate Essex Farm, a 1,500-acre diversified membership farm in Essex, New York. Together, Kristin and Mark have over 50 years of farming experience, and with their team, over 120 years of farming experience. Mark says they, quote, do their best to feed 200 members a year-round diet. With their team of women leaders, they raise animals, vegetables, grain, hay, milk cows, and laying hens. They also do what they can to add value to their shares with fruit, maple syrup, sauerkraut, kimchi, and more. Kristin has also written 2 excellent books about their farm experiences called The Dirty Life and Good Husbandry. Mark and Kristin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Katie. We're so happy to be here.
Yay! I'm glad we're finally chatting. I feel like this is years in the coming. Okay, so I always like to start at the beginning. As I already noted, you two have a wealth of farming experience. I know this is probably a longish story at this point, but please catch us up. Tell us about how you came to farm and operate Essex Farm.
It's hard to say exactly when it started for me, but the longest story, I will make it short, was that I was sitting in college, not sure what I would do with my life. And a professor took us on free, ungraded field trips to visit farms. And this is circa 1993. And I just fell in love with farming. And so that was when I first realized that that was what I wanted my life to be all about.
And for me, it was much later in my adult life that I found farming, and it hit me sort of like a ton of bricks. I was working as a freelance writer living in New York City, and I got really interested in the story of these first generation farms that were popping up along the Hudson Valley. This was the late 90s, early 2000s. And I started interviewing these farmers who seemed to be sort of going against the tide. When everybody was trying to get out of farming, they were getting in and jumping in with both feet. And that led me to Mark's farm in Pennsylvania, where he promptly handed me a knife and a shovel and put me to work. And I really just deeply fell in love with the work and the food and eventually with him. And here we are 22 years later, 24 years later, with this really amazing farm that I love with all my heart, and two children who've grown up here, and we're grown on the food that we produce along with our wonderful members and our farm team. And it's been a really wonderful, sometimes not wonderful, but mostly wonderful ride these last couple of decades.
Yes, it's still life, right?
It's always complicated.
And how did you end up on the land in Essex? I mean, I feel kind of funny asking you all this because, Kristin, you have books about this, but our audience hasn't read them. So tell us.
The books have been out for a long time, so I'm sure there's plenty of people who don't know the story. And, well, I met Mark because I went to interview him for a story that I was proposing. And when we fell in love with each other and decided we wanted to start a farm together, we started looking for land that we could own, with our sights set on sort of like a maybe 50-acre family-sized plot. And what came to us instead was this 500-acre piece of land here in the very northeast corner of New York State. We're right on the shore of Lake Champlain. If you look across the lake from us, you see Burlington, Vermont. So that's kind of our neck of the woods. We have the high peaks of the Adirondacks to our west and the Green Mountains to our east across the lake. And when we landed here in 2004, we looked at this land and thought, what are we going to do here? And Mark had been experimenting with expanding his production when he was farming in Pennsylvania, where I met him. He had been growing vegetables, and that's how he trained. And when we got here, we thought, we could grow a full diet for ourselves and our neighbors and our community, and we could do it year round. And it's kind of a bonkers idea, but I didn't know any better, and he was wildly ambitious and confident in himself. So that's what we did from the very beginning. We decided we were going to produce as our main product a membership that was meant to supplant the grocery store for our members. We started with 7 members back then, and the scale of the farm has grown and then constricted a little bit and grown again. But we've always done the same thing as our main business model, which is to grow a full diet year-round for our members. And that includes beef, pork, lamb, eggs. These days we milk about 25 Jersey cows for milk and dairy products. We grow about 60 different kinds of vegetables. Some years we're producing quite a lot of our own small grains. Some years we're buying those in for our animal feed. We make hay here. We make maple syrup. And then we have a lot of value-added products that we use to add value to our membership. So we make kimchi and sauerkraut. We make soap with the excess fat from our animals. And we think that we're pretty lucky to be able to eat as well as we do. And I always say it's sort of like having what the corporate people call the golden handcuffs, because I know that if we stopped farming here, we would never eat as well as we do now. So I think that's the greatest joy of what we do. And our members having this community of people who are intimately connected to us because, they're literally made of the food that we grow is pretty special too.
It's a very special thing. I know that of just our relationship with our CSA members. It's a sweet, special relationship. I'm like, I want to go all these different directions. I want to talk more about the CSA, but I also want to paint a fuller picture of your farm. You described the setting beautifully. What does that translate to in terms of growing conditions and climate, and especially in terms of a year-round farm? How does that work? Because I'm picturing a place that's probably pretty darn cold in the winter.
Yeah, I heard something, I think it was on Vermont Public in the fall, that said that in the last 20 years, this region has extended its frost-free season by 30 days.
Oh, wow.
So we're moving quickly away from zone 4 and not quite in zone 6. We're somewhere in the middle of that, 5A or B. And so even though it seems like we're in sort of a Montreal winter wasteland, as we are in some years, and we really do have leaves on the tree for only about 6 months of the year, we have great soil. We're really on bottomland. A lot of it's clay, a heavier clay called Kingsbury. But our best drained ground is a Nellis silt loam that it's truly the stuff of sort of probably not modern day, but ancient warfare. I mean, it's the kind of thing you would fight over because everything that you could grow does grow. It's been quite amazing to have grown up on organic marginal land farms and trained on those farms, and then to come to a place where a seed goes in the ground and you don't have to fight the clay or have the sand drain away all the water. It's really a majestic piece of soil and landscape. I love it.
I would just add that our strategy for feeding people well all year round in a climate where, a good chunk of the year is not growing season weather is to really lean heavy into storage crops during the growing season. And then we teach our members how to really enjoy those crops over the winter. So a lot of cabbage, a lot of carrot salads. We have a little bit of greenhouse production. Even right now, we're still harvesting spinach. So we do a little bit of season extension stuff, but mostly we rely on growing the crops that are delicious to eat outside of the window of the growing season. And then just encouraging people to really make great use of the meat and all of the other delicious things that aren't dependent on being produced during the growing season. We also preserve a lot of their own vegetables over the summer. So, most of our members will have a lot of herbs in the freezer and a bunch of tomatoes that they can use all winter, hardy greens that they've already prepared, things like that. So part of the job is really just teaching people how to use a seasonal whole food diet year round.
So you have 25 cows in milk right now, which is a lot of milk. So, and this is raw milk.
This is raw milk.
Okay. So you're licensed as a raw milk dairy then?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So that's really interesting. That's something that you can't do in my state, Oregon. So there's a lot of differences between states on raw milk.
Lots of differences.
It'll be interesting to see with the new presidential administration what happens to raw milk in the sort of, as Kristin just put it, the political football of the moment of, we're seeing, for a long time, very liberal, progressive people have claimed, often erroneously, that the more dirt in the milk, the better. Obviously, that's not true, but
no.
maybe by having fewer denatured enzymes makes milk more digestible, that discussion. And then what we're seeing also in terms of our emergent market is we're seeing a more Christian, traditional community of members who are signing up because they're interested in access to God's best food and in the least processed way. So it's been kind of fun to see the crossover socially, where the raw milk, which often is polarizing people, like, A, this shouldn't be done, we should pasteurize, B, this is the only way to go. We're actually, not only are we sort of skipping that issue altogether, but in the membership now bringing together socially two very divergent political groups around one fluid, milk, and they're loving it. So it's kind of fun to be at the nexus of that cultural opposition, as it were.
Yeah, we will unite them with milk. No, we've observed that too with our CSA membership. And also when I was in the baby making stage of life, just how when you would go around, if there's a political spectrum, it's like it curves back around. And so I would I found through, my experience of home birthing and being an organic farmer that there were people that I ended up having all this stuff in common with, that then when, we just didn't talk about politics, because
It's a very interesting place to be in culturally. And I have always believed that we have great opportunity as farmers to link those two sides of the curve and allow places for conversation to happen.
And at the actually off of that line altogether, a neighbor came down in his horse and buggy, and we're part of the community with now probably close to over 100 Amish who live here. And his cow had dried up, and he came down to buy our raw milk retail. And so that just completed the whole picture for me. He's coming down to buy, our retail pricing is $8 a half gallon. He came down to buy retail, not certified organic, certified raw milk, because he didn't have any for his family. So that was a neat moment of like, oh, right, you need this milk. You don't have a cow. You're willing to pay extra to have good milk. And you're a conservative Amish household. I loved it.
Yeah. Our audience is mostly, veg flour growers. And we could talk about milk all day. They may or may not be going that direction, but it is, the raw milk conversation is one I also hope gets to happen, because we learned a lot when we had our own dairy cows and we're doing raw milk for 2 years about how to make it safe. And, just so for people know out there, there's so many testing protocols you can do. So it isn't like, oh, we're just drinking dirty, gross milk. It's you can have clean milk from healthy cows. And because it's clean and they're healthy, pasteurization is just not necessary. It's not as though people are like, yeah, yum, let's drink disgusting products. And that's something that really does have to be on a small farm, that level of touch. Pasteurization exists for a reason, right? When you get into bigger farms and bigger food systems.
Absolutely. And we're seeing right now with bird flu, there are really good reasons to have testing protocols in place and for farmers to assure their customer base that they're producing a safe product is really, really important for all of us, for the whole market.
And I want to jump in here to say to all of you all vegetable growers out there, I didn't really think there was a life in farming beyond vegetables. I was definitely trained to focus on a year-round organic succession plantings. And I think the best thing that ever happened to my vegetable growing was to buy the first and now 50 dairy cows. That they're not a bulletproof animal, but if you give them good grass and water and some minerals, they live well. And I highly recommend to anyone that has access to a couple acres of good grazing land to add to your vegetables that milking cow for so many reasons. It opened up my eyes to farming in a way that I didn't expect. And I feel really lucky to have a farm with lots of vegetables and lots of dairy cows.
I like that. We're going to transform some people's farms here in our 1-hour podcast episode. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Rimmel greenhouses are proudly built right here in America and shipped to anywhere in the U.S. With technical sales staff members located across the country, many with growing experience, the Rimmel Greenhouses team of experts will serve as your trusted partner every step of the way to ensure that you get exceptional value from your greenhouse investment. Visit Rimmel.com to get a quote today. Local Line is the most popular software platform for farmers and food hubs selling direct to consumer. With features like e-commerce, inventory management, subscriptions, and box builder, Local Line helps you grow sales, save time, and streamline your operations. In fact, last year, farms that used Local Line grew their sales by 23%. Ready to switch to a proven sales software that does it all? Local Line has no setup fees, no commissions, and will migrate your storefront for free, so you'll be up and running in no time. As a GFM podcast listener, Local Line is offering a free premium feature for 1 year with your subscription using the coupon code GFM2025. Don't wait. Start your season off the right way with Local Line. Looking for innovative packaging solutions to take your business to the next level? Look no further than Aru Company, your one-stop shop for all your packaging needs. Aru offers sustainable and comprehensive packaging solutions for the floral, produce, and specialty packaging industries, ensuring you receive high-quality products customized to your needs. Hydroponically grown herbs and produce are becoming increasingly popular, and they have the perfect packaging solution to keep them fresh and alive for longer. With strong bottom seals and conical-shaped sleeves, their packaging ensures the root ball stays stable and upright, crucial for maintaining freshness. Visit shop.aru.com today and keep your greens thriving with their perfect packaging solution. Ordering is a breeze. And for Growing for Market listeners, they've got a special offer just for you. Use the code GFM15 during checkout to enjoy an exclusive 15% discount on their web shop. For more options, be sure to visit Aru Company at aru.com and discover the complete range of their product offerings. Because when it comes to quality and innovation, Aru Company is the name you can trust.
And now, back to the show. We got off on that tangent, which we could even go farther, but I want to circle back to your CSA concept, because you talked about this idea of replacing the grocery store, but I don't think we've really talked through exactly how radical this economic model is that you guys developed. And I'd love for you to talk about that, where it came from, how it's worked for you. You've now been doing this for a long time. So I'm sure that in farming, it never feels like ever totally launched, but clearly it's been working. So let's talk about it.
And I think maybe I'll do the prehistory of before the BK before Kristin, and maybe you take it to sort of how we execute it.
Okay.
Now, I was trained in the craft program in Columbia County as my first formal apprenticeship after visiting a lot of different farms around the country and around the world. And they were just starting with vegetables to have the free choice table. You know, there was all this discussion of like, what if your members don't like eggplant, or if you give them too many cabbages, what happens? And these are our conversations in membership farms that I think still go on today. And there's a long development there of how people were playing with mix and match, and you can take two of any of the following. And there's lots of different ways. And in Pennsylvania, when I started farming on my own as a subsidiary of the land that I was on, I wasn't the landowner, but I was starting my own business. The membership I had there, while it did eventually move into eggs and meat and dairy from other farms as sort of an aggregator additionally to the vegetables, I did everything there by weight, which looking back seems a little foolish, but that was sort of the next step. Was at a given time of the year, I weighed sort of everything I had and kind of came up with this artificial number of like, okay, members this week can take X pounds. So in the spring, lots of greens, some asparagus, lightweight, storage season more. And within that, unless there was a specific limit, take as much as you want. So that was kind of the beginning of like, oh, this works. Not everyone likes the same thing. Some people really like the small beets. I personally like a really big beet, peel it once, cook and go. And so it was those kind of developments. And again, talking to lots of other people, the Temple Wilton farm in New Hampshire, where they had sort of a 24/7 come and get your food here in our farm store as a member any time of the week. All of those farms that I was visiting and hearing about in the 90s were sort of each adding to this idea that Kristin wrote about, which is sort of like eating like a farmer. Like, oh, wait, farmers don't do all this like point of sale purchase. We don't go out and say, I mean, we do to some extent if there's a cost in our head about it, but basically we eat well, what we want, when we want. And it seemed so right to create a business around that concept, given the mix and match and the other things we were learning about memberships. And so when we started here, we basically started from the beginning with free choice year round, take whatever you want. And maybe you can take it to sort of how that looks today in terms of the sort of production and how free choice works.
So there are a couple of reasons that model worked for our farm. One is that we're in a really small community here. So if we wanted to create a farm business that supported our family, we needed to either leave the farm and market elsewhere, or we needed to capture a really large percentage of our community's food dollars,
right,
in order to sustain ourselves. And we chose B because we really didn't want to go off the farm, and we really didn't want to have to go to farmers market and sell every weekend. And we were very lucky to be in a community that really responded to that. We're a bit of a backwater here. Essex is 700 people. Especially when we arrived 20 years ago, there was this legacy culture of people who had grown up on farm food and knew how to preserve and really appreciated fresh food. So, and it just is also just like a very uplifting community that wants people trying to do things here to succeed. So even though we were coming from outside into this little community, we were really supported by our neighbors and by other people in the region. Some of our members have been with us still since the first year. And this sort of dream that Mark had of providing a full diet, which just feels good, also kind of made business sense to us in a weird way. I mean, everybody who's listening to this who is farming is right now saying, but you have to these different enterprises, and it's so expensive to have all the infrastructure to do all of these different things. And how do you manage the time and the chaos? And you have to be expert in, beef, pork, chicken, liver, blah, 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 everything. And that's all true. And that is probably why our concept has not caught on like wildfire and rampaged across the country. We have some good friends who are doing the same thing that we do in the sort of greater DC area, Move to Orchard. They also do a full diet CSA. But other than that, we don't know anybody who is using this model right now.
I mean, we did for 2 years, right? I could tell you all the reasons why it wasn't a good fit for our place, but
I remember when you tried, and economically, I know it was a huge hit for you, and I felt terrible about that.
It's okay. We learned so much, Kristin. We call those the food adventure years.
I love it.
We literally made bumper stickers for our members that year that said, "I am a food adventurer."
Love it.
It's perfect.
Do you want to talk about your experience?
I'm trying to think if I've really talked about it much on the podcast. I wrote an article about it for Growing for Market, but yeah, so we read your book, and then you came and spoke in Oregon about full diet, CSA, and other things. We should talk about the horses at some point too. I didn't even put that in the podcast notes, but that was another thing I remember you spoke about. And thankfully we didn't also dive into that. That might have been a little much. But yeah, we followed the same model for 2 years. And the challenges for us, so it's a different situation, right? You're in a very rural area. We are too, but it's like a more rural exurban area where people still have access to like good quality natural food stores and many, many farmers markets and other farms. So we've just found it a little bit difficult to manage all the enterprises, like you said. And again, your farm had like a barn and things too. So there's so many individual details. So we didn't have any infrastructure like that at all. And then our farm floods every winter. So for us to overwinter animals, we found was not a good option. Like we were having to herd animals from one section of our farm to another and then put them in small areas that don't flood during floods. So like you were saying, there's just so many different individual factors for every farm, and some of which you don't even really understand before you get started. So
yeah. I think another thing that lent itself to this model here in Essex was that the value of land was super cheap when we moved here. And so we were able to practice this very extensive style of agriculture without carrying a ton of land debt. And that has allowed us to really make the most of the synergy between plants and animals without needing to sort of pump value out of every square foot of this place, if that makes sense.
Yes. There's a lot of people are not in that same situation these days with land being so expensive. It sounds like maybe land has gone up in price in that area now.
It has a bit, but compared to land values just across the lake from us in Vermont, or even to our north, the next county north, I think the official USDA average acre value here in Essex County, what did I say the other day? Like $3,600?
If that.
And then just north of us, it's like $5,600 or something.
Okay.
So it's definitely low for the region. We don't have a lot of big open fields here in our county. It's more pockets of good farmland, but small enough that the really big ag players are not interested.
Yeah. So in terms of the planning, I mean, even just from even if we're just talking vegetables, how do you plan for growing food for all the people if they can take whatever they want? And are there limits, at some points?
Yes, we limit things if we don't have enough in a given week for everybody to take what they want. And we shifted this year to a really kind of a cool system that puts more responsibility on the members. So if an item is labeled green, take all you want. You can put it up, you put it in your freezer, just go wild. If it's yellow, be a little bit more mindful, take plenty for the week, but it's not plentiful enough for storage. And if it's red, you just choose your one red item for the week because we don't have enough for everybody to take what they want, but take enough for a meal, and then that's your red item. So they have to self-limit in that way. They're a really good community of people who care about one another as well as about the farm. So they tend to respect those limits really sweetly. And then we aim to overproduce a little bit so that we have a cushion and have our on-farm retail store where we can market crops that we've got in excess that the membership doesn't need. And that's a really nice sponge because we don't know what our harvest is going to be in any given year. But if we're always aiming for a little bit extra, we have never gotten into a situation where we just don't have enough for members. And we have this sort of buffer of food that we can sell outside of the membership for some extra revenue too. And that's worked pretty well. We also use a lot of extra stuff in trade with other farms. If there's something that didn't do well for us, then we might trade for a crop that was grown by a farmer down the road or across the lake from us.
And is the farm store a more recent development for you all in terms of having that structured release valve? I don't remember hearing about that previously.
It's been around on the farm for at least 10, 15 years.
Oh, okay.
But we've put a lot more energy into it in the last 18 months or so. Well, this is another part of the story. We used to market about half of our memberships in and around New York City. Mm-hmm. And in the post-pandemic economic changes, we dropped that part of our business and went back to just having a local market. So we needed to put a little bit more effort into the farm store to capture some of the revenue from folks who didn't want a membership, but were here for the summer or passing through and had money to spend on local food. So that's been great. That I think we quadrupled our sales in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
Out of the store, but it's a very modest little structure. It's not anything grand. It's a little cabin where we sell meat and milk and eggs and vegetables and some other little things that we buy in for resale.
Okay. So I want to talk about this. When we were emailing to set up the interview, Mark wrote, "To the best of our ability, we stay just this side of solvency. And by getting smaller over the past few years, we have opened up new markets and increased our quality of life." I'm guessing this is in reference to like ending the New York City model, but can you just talk more about how you've been adjusting and evolving to make sure that everything's still working on the farm over these years?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll take it first. And Kristin and I have two sort of different stories about how this unrolled. And you can kick me under the table if you don't like what you hear. But probably 3 years ago, I was sort of at the end of looking out there to try to figure out how to keep horses going, how to keep the farm in line with what I would call sort of my ethical backdrop. And Kristin has written beautifully about this in the past, about sort of our different ethics and what drives us and how it comes out in the wash when we're both sitting here participating on this farm. And so I think a lot of it came down to sort of how she and I relate both to each other and to the farm. And we decided as a team, I think individually, and I think with sort of, I would say, yellow light on my part, to sell horses and equipment at around that time, that it was no longer safe, economical, or in our current value system to have draft horses as part of our daily work. And so that was a really big change. That said, Kristin doesn't know this, but I was invited this week to go with one of the farmers here to look at a team of drafts to see if they might be coming back. So there are changes afoot because good dreams come back to life.
It's a good thing you can't see my face on the podcast right now.
I can see it though.
So all that said, I had felt like I had sort of let down farm and family in a number of different ways over the years. Economically, that we still and didn't have any sort of retirement plan. Incomes were marginal at best. And I didn't feel like I was farming in a way that brought me deep satisfaction, ease, whatever word you want to use. And so I said, look, Kristin, I don't think we should go on like this. Let's look at longer term development options. We have this incredible land base that the original owner said, look, you guys should own this, even though I didn't want to put our money into acquisition, he said, look, I'm going to die, which he did. You should buy this land. So we own this 500 acres of the 1,500 acres that we work on. And Kristin in different ways said, well, that's not an option. We're going to keep going. And I was like, I'm not sure I like where this is going, but the result has been really interesting, I think, for both of us, both challenging and at times frustrating and at times really satisfying. And I think maybe Kristin can talk a little bit about sort of what's evolved. But around that time, we were also in more communication with the team of farmers who really are the backbone of this place, right? It's Kristin and I work hard and we work a lot, but we have a team of now about 10 of us who all work here. And one of the frustrations they had was we didn't have the infrastructure to really be providing our remote members with the kind of quality we were able to give our local members. And we were seeing all these market changes where the cost of distribution and getting it there was really high. So it was sort of a perfect storm of me saying, hold on a second, I don't like farming on a tractor. And Kristin saying, look, we can't not do this. And all these things came together. And the result has been kind of this slow, both intentional and unintentional evolution to where Kristin is not only moving forward with the farm, but also leading a group of people who ended up being all women towards, I would call it, a different farm that I think has as many strengths, if not more, as sort of the previous iterations. It's been really interesting to watch from the sidelines, still doing a lot of the work, but doing less of the people management, still about the same bit of administration, but less of the kind of we're doing it this way and more of like, how do you guys want to do this? How can I help has been from my side of it. And so Kristin, maybe you want to expand a little bit about how that's felt. And I think some of the interesting parts that I've watched Kristin go through is as it shifted to her sort of in charge of the daily works, not always feeling like, oh, it's this rosy, easy team to lead. Like I was sort of expecting with a team of women for everyone to sort of lift Kristin up, and her level of stress hasn't always gotten easier. That all said, in the last few months, last 6 months, I'd say that we're starting to see a rosy future in the social dynamics of that same group of people starting to ask me and Kristin, like we used to ask each other, how can we help you farm? And so I'll leave it with that and see where you take that story.
Well, now I can't stop thinking about this team of horses that you're going to look at. But,
Played.
well, there's a lot there to unpack, but I think the thing that might be interesting to other farmers, especially other farmers who have done their startup, is just realizing that every farm at some point in its evolution has to shift from startup mentality to sort of how are we going to run this thing smoothly mentality. And it's a very different energy. And we never could have started this farm without Mark's very fiery, entrepreneurial, bullheaded, stubborn,
Steady now,
get it done energy. And I think that we did come to a time in the last few years where it was time to stop reinventing, to settle into a more steady way of running this place that's also looking into the future, because we're in our early 50s now. So we're not immortal, and it's time to start thinking about succession and what happens to this place when we don't want to get up and milk cows and weed fields anymore. So there's a lot of really wonderful things about the shift in leadership on the farm. And for me, the biggest one is the opportunity to work with these fabulous farmers that we have here. We're just so lucky that we get amazing people who are intelligent and thoughtful and ambitious and just really wonderful to be with also. And for me, working more closely with those folks on a sort of management and co-management level has been great. It's not the role I would have ever picked for myself. But, when you're 50, you kind of get to choose, am I going to ossify and just keep doing what I've been doing? Or am I going to branch out and explore different aspects of myself? And we went that way. I miss writing. I haven't really had the time or creative energy to write since I took over the main management of the farm. But I'm hopeful that that'll be part of my future at some point.
Yeah, I remember I was emailing with you maybe 2 years ago, and you had said, like, I am just taking over. So you're really shifting roles, it sounds like, as the farm evolves and settles into its next iteration of maybe something sustainable. Okay. And so the horses, you kind of just dropped that in there. The horses are gone too, but maybe coming back. But let's talk about them being gone. I'm curious about, because I remember that was part of the whole original kind of like, let's call it idealistic, but also values driven goal of your farm was to not just think about what you're growing, but how you're growing it. And the horses seemed like a really big part of that, but it sounds like at some point less so. I heard the word like danger or safety fall in there. What was the story there?
Okay, so the horses are the closest thing to my heart. I just loved working with horses. It was really beautiful work, and it was directly in line with our values, which was to try to create a farm that relied less on fossil fuel and more on, this sort of like very, very renewable energy source that's alive. But two things happened, I think, in the growth years of our farm. One was that our scale increased, which was necessary in order to meet the demands of overhead and buying our land. And we had 2 kids, and there was just a need to scale up in order to keep this big ship running. And at the same time, the people who were coming to our farm were not pure interns anymore. So they were working for a wage, and having that payroll to meet every couple of weeks meant that we had to be really mindful of how time was being spent. And time on horses, as we all know, is super beautiful and really great for the land, but it's a very slow style of work. And the farm just really economically could not sustain paying people to work with horses here. And it also, at a certain point, started to feel unsafe for the teamsters and also the horses when we had people coming in very green and didn't feel like we really had the bandwidth to train them to the level that they needed to be in to work safely with, especially with multiple hitches of horses, 3, 4, 5, 6 horses working together. So I think it was probably me, even though it broke my heart, who put the foot down and said, we can't do it like this anymore. And we held on to some of our teams for a couple more years, but our last team was sold, like 18 months ago?
Further.
2 years ago now, to Tiana Kennedy, who is using them to farm in the Hudson Valley. And I get these wonderful updates of how they're doing and pictures of her working them in the woods and her field growing vegetables. So their legacy continues, and it'll always be a huge part of my heart, but not a really significant working part of the farm for many years now.
Yeah.
And the nice part is that Kristin is right, and that there may be horses here sooner than she thinks doing field work again. My future dream in talking with other farmers here who do have horse interest is the Amish have kept alive the almost industrial approach to farming with horses, in that they're using big equipment, sometimes motorized, sometimes not, but also manufacturing equipment that's much more developed than what we were using. And so the idea of getting a team and somebody here who maybe as a volunteer would go out and mow hay is not out of the question. A new reciprocating INJ sickle bar mower that doesn't plug, that's 9 feet with 2 draft horses, can lay down 15 acres a day. With a tractor, I usually lay down more like 20 to 30, but could it be a sideline? Absolutely. So it's going to be interesting to see how the next 10 years go. Our kids are no longer at the age where being stepped on by a draft horse is inherently deadly. A lot of it was just small kids, and like Kristin said, big hitches and untrained teamsters who not only weren't following the rules, but there's a golden rule of humanity, mostly guilty men who, being 5% more confident gets us on a podcast and we reveal things, right? Being 50% more confident, and you're suddenly in another territory that's not really healthy, right? You want to be brave enough to try something new, but maybe not stupid enough to jump off a cliff without a parachute. And what was starting to happen is we would go out and see a very smart, very strong person, male or female, but often male, making a really egregious mistake in teamster handling, having just said to them, please don't do it this way, right? And so part of it was that Kristin and I felt we didn't have enough time to really do the long, slow apprenticeship that we had where we had made all those mistakes with better trained older horses in smaller hitches under better supervision. And so it wasn't really a your fault, my fault. It was more like we're no longer in that context. And one of the questions now with Kristin's team of much more responsible human beings is, if it became something they did on their weekends, is there a place to bring small draft power back? And I don't think I'm dead set on making it come back. It hasn't been really on my framework until this farmer recently is like, look, I really would like to have a team. And having a situation regionally where there is nobody doing anything on open lands makes it kind of attractive to say, oh, we could have a draft horse at almost no cost. The cost of hay is going down around here because there's very little demand. There's fewer animals. So we're in an interesting transition time where until those fields grow up, there may be some opportunities for some sort of inexplicably crazy draft horse farming, among other projects.
Well, we'll have to have you on again in a couple of years and find out how that worked out.
Just a shout out to anyone out there who looks towards getting draft horses, as Kristin wrote in her first book, an old McCormick Deering adjustable horse cultivator, 1 row for 2 horses. It did better weed control than almost any tractor implement I'd ever been on in my training because it's flexible for the sort of heterogeneous production methods that small scale was engendering here. We're not like a razor-shaped bed where you can go down with high-tech tools. And so given that our lettuces look different as they went down the field, to be able to adjust on the fly the width of your sweeps was something that I didn't have tractor access to. So for those of you that have questions about how it could look on a small place, if you have enough land to graze and make some hay, 2 horses and a 2-horse cultivator can actually reduce labor, which they did for us for many years.
Yeah, last year I interviewed a farmer out here in Oregon, Zoe Bradbury of Valley Flora, I think I remember her name, farm out on the coast. She uses horses, but she has a smaller operation than you, and I think she's the only person who uses them, right? Because I really hear what you're saying here. And she grew up as a horse person, like you, Kristin, like horses are her heart, you know? The lack of knowledge in the culture now about horses, and even I imagine most people coming out to your farm, which was true at our farm, just haven't even grown up around large animals. It's just, there's so much to learn. It's such a huge learning curve to know how to be safe around these animals. And then you add the equipment, and I can see how that could get pretty sketchy pretty fast. And well, I'll be interested to hear what happens in the future for you all.
Another interesting thing that I think is worth throwing in here, and I'm remembering Kristin with 6 horses plowing and having visitors show up, is that as the farm turns outward, I think we really looked inward to our local community and our family, and we didn't have as much traffic in the fields. Now Essex is shifting to be a place where people either have second homes or come to visit. And so you're getting a lot more of the traffic of people who are agri-curious and wanting to spend a lot of money on a little bit of food to have an experience, but they also walk out into the field or there'll be a tour. And so it was also this juxtaposition of sort of production where you've got these 6 horses, one of whom is not behaving well, and an SUV drives into the field without permission. And I can see Kristin there with this hitch that was a little beyond our training. And she hit a tree and they were not helping. And it was just this awkward jumble of energies that we needed a little more attention to we're now an open farm where we really do want people's energy and dollars and time to be here with us, but they're not farmers and they're not members. Who are they? So that was also one of the things that I think as the farm develops to try to figure out that interface and care is something that we didn't quite figure out.
Can I say one more thing about the horses?
Yes.
I think on a agricultural philosophy and mission level, as we sort of gained knowledge and the world started also being really curious on a scientific level about how the carbon cycle was working, I think we felt like letting go of the horses in order to focus on other climate-friendly agricultural practices was a fair trade for our mission. And in the years since we left the horses behind, we've put a ton more energy into cover cropping, for example, and making sure that our rotational grazing is really hitting the mark, and all the other things that we do in regenerative agriculture in order to improve our carbon footprint. So we were really shifting away from not to use fossil fuel to implementing more methods that were sequestering carbon.
And we can actually agree on that. I think you're exactly right. And I was shocked by looking up last year the sort of return on investment in terms of carbon if I planted rye in October for grazing with a no-till drill on top of sorghum Sudan grass. So I was able to borrow the local soil and water no-till drill, 12 feet wide, pulled it with a 5500 John Deere tractor, did it in my sleep at night. I mean, the other amazing thing is to plant 20 acres as an afterthought on a busy day with a tractor, as opposed to have it be the week's goal, it's just a really different energetics. Not that fun to sit on a tractor, but kind of amazing to watch everything grow in a much more sort of organized way, is right on. And we would never have spread, now we spread close to 6,000 tons of compost a year. That's a full Teamster's job for the entire year, right? And so that, and the Amish have figured out in many different of their communities how to scale up to have these 14 horse hitches pulling giant spreaders and big plows. We were not in a big enough community with enough trained people to do that. And Kristin, I think, is exactly right that there are ways to look at other solutions to sort of how do you make less harm more good as part of your farmscape. And I think maybe we shift the conversation. I think marketing is probably the first one that in the end, growing for market can allow us to do some of these braver ecological versions, whether it's with or without horses.
Yes, I agree. There's many places where farmers can make a positive difference that aren't as radical as having horses, which it's beautiful. But yeah, all the things you said. Yeah. I want to talk too about your team of people. So you've mentioned this several times now. You have an awesome team you've built. Talk to me about how that's worked. How do you recruit people? How do you integrate them into the team and get them invested and stick around? I know this is something our farm, actually, I could probably give you like a long laundry list of why our full diet experiment didn't really launch. I mean, one of them for us was it was very hard to recruit and retain people who could stick around, because when you have that many enterprises, you can't have turnover every year because there was just too much work for the two of us, my husband and I, to manage when you have all those different enterprises. So this is clearly a very important part of running a farm with so many different moving parts. Tell us your secret wisdom.
Well,
okay,
yeah,
maybe that was a little too much.
I don't think anything secret or particularly wise, but like everything in farming, the landscape of hiring and retaining keeps shifting. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest reasons we stopped doing New York City was the inability to keep on board a large enough team to fulfill that huge push every week. So it was actually, I think, great on all levels to get smaller and really sort of do more conscious team building within our team. Just to note, I think we and a lot of the other farmers I've been talking to this winter are noting a real uptick in interest again.
Because there was a dip there for a while.
There was a huge dip.
Yeah. Like people were not into it anymore.
Yeah. But our team and other farms that I've talked to in the neighborhood have noted a huge quantity of really good quality applicants for the 2025 season. So I'm super happy about that. Our team is made up mostly of people who come from outside of the area, who hear about our farm and want to experience a really diversified direct market model to see what they can learn from it. Our longest term person has been with us. Gosh, how long has Barbara been with us?
Good. She joined us year 4, probably.
Yeah, and she's in her...
That's a long time.
She's in her 70s, and really sometimes we look at each other and say, you know, this farm can't survive without her, and B, how is it that she can still outwork the 20-year-olds?
That's not an exaggeration. She will take on, with her own brand of personality, the project that no one else does. So for instance, we're getting better at fully mechanical weed control in carrots, but we will rotate back to a field that had dairy grazing there last year with high weed pressure. Let's say we let some Galansoga go to seed under the cover crop that the dairy cows were grazing, which we've done more than once accidentally. She's the one who goes out there and really puts in almost 40 hours a week where she does stoop labor, charges us $1 an hour. She's like, just give me $1 an hour. And makes it happen so that at the end of the season, instead of having amaranth shedding 200,000 seeds per plant, it's clean. You know, people are like, how do you have your stuff clean? You know, like Barbara did it. You know, we go out, we do our 4 cultivations, our 6 cultivations, and there's still weed pressure. So she's one story. Anne is maybe the second.
Anne manages our animal team, and she's been with us for almost a decade
More than,
now.
No, it's 11.
Okay, maybe it's 11. But she's got this deep knowledge of each of our animal groups and is able to sort of help lead the team that does the chores every day and keep her eyes on what all these different classes of animals need. We've got some folks who are in...
You got to do a shout out for Beth as the next one in that trinity.
Totally. Our vegetable manager, who really should be called something bigger than that, because what she gets done here is really quite amazing. Her name's Beth, and she produced a shockingly good quality product of vegetables last year
and the year before,
during two very, very difficult, challenging seasons weather-wise. We had a really some super, super big rain events last summer that it would have been reasonable to think we weren't going to get a good harvest, and she just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, the last 2 years, 10 inches over normal rainfall during the growing season and at the beginning of the growing season.
And part of it is that she has the same person that's sort of her second in leadership in vegetable team, who's been with us for several seasons now. So having that consistency of people who, you know, come back in the spring with already knowing how things work here is huge. And I don't want to go through our entire team person by person, but if they're listening and I've left you out, please know I love you. We also get a really nice influx every year of new blood and fresh ideas and you know, people who come onto the farm with good beginner eyes. We joined the dairy grazing apprenticeship this year. And we're super happy to welcome on board a farmer who just finished her apprenticeship. So she will be coming on with 2 years of really good grass-fed dairy experience. We have a great farmer from Germany here this year who's on a J1 management visa and had a lot of experience in Germany as a butcher and managing different animal groups on farms across Europe. So it's super to have her. And then we always have a few young folks who are farming for the first time with us. And we love watching how their skills develop and seeing where they fit into the farm. We're trying to be a lot more mindful now of onboarding people thoughtfully and making sure that they're really taken care of, especially in the first weeks and months that they're here, so that they have a good experience and getting what they need out of the relationship.
I want to jump in and say that there's another group that I think Kristin has cultivated really, really well, and that's the people on the milking shift. So we now have more and more community members who are coming in and saying, I'm willing as a father, as a mother, to take 1, 2, 3 milking shifts a week and join the team, hopefully with one of us full-timers, so that when the circuit breaker trips, you actually know where the panel is. And that, I think, is starting to have the longevity that I think is missing in a lot of the types of energy this farm had in the past, but also other farms where it's sort of, hey, here we are, we're a summer intern. And I think bringing all of our full-time and part-time team into the milking world, often each of us will have a different set of shifts for milking each week, but then to also bring in members and other community members who aren't members to milk. I think, again, so much of what we're talking around is how people connect to each other and to the planet. And I think these circles of reinforcement touch on marketing, but they also touch on education and, you know, bringing kids up in our community and the few that there are, and how people who are older, who wouldn't necessarily have a job, have meaningful work that actually builds things, I think is a really exciting sort of Essex Farm 2.0 intentionality, to use that word, that I really like seeing that Kristin and I could spend a little time on this interview and the farm is flowing smoothly because of this really complex community that's kind of growing up around the farm, in some cases intentional, in some cases an accident that's like, wait, that person shouldn't be milking. Wow, they're amazing, right? So there are a lot of, if we keep our eyes open and our flexibility there, I think we're seeing that kind of change where it is that next generation of kind of evolution of something that everyone is like, of course, this is good. We don't have to question that. We've been here 22 years. This is nourishing people really well. Now, how do we make it better, each of us, and what roles do we have and what responsibilities? I like what I see as my team of people here. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it sounds, I'm picturing right now, you're sitting there in your house chatting with me, and there's probably outside a flurry of activity happening on the farm. People coming and going, doing their thing. I love that energy. Just like people do know what they're doing good work.
It is. It's really fun to be. I wasn't like a team sports person when I was younger, but there's something so beautiful about being part of a team that gets up every day and says, how can we do this? Make it happen. how do we do it a little better? How can we support each other? It's really great.
And I think that's all within the backdrop of, as Kristin mentioned, as we get more efficient, quote unquote, and more focused, everyone really has a more limited apprenticeship, right? It used to be you jump around a little bit more, and now people come in and wash all the jars for the second time, to make sure we can put product into a clean container, or do the same repetitive picking of kale every week all winter. And despite the sort of apparent monotony, I think because of the team energy, I think we all feel like, oh, I'm doing this again. It's not, we're just doing boring work again. It's meaningful work as part of the team's desire to create what it is that we're creating. And I've been kind of surprised that these really, quote, again, unquote, overqualified farmers, many of them coming with advanced degrees and really fancy educations, are doing what is seen by many fancy places as menial work, with the kind of goodwill and smile and good energy that really makes it all feel worth it. And it's really been exciting to see that too. And I think, again, Barbara, as our oldest leader, an incredible intellectual herself, showing us all that doing the chop wood, carry water of farming, not just for a summer, not just for a whole season, but for a lifetime. I think that energy is now transcending some of the cultural opposition to hard work and repetitive work, that it can actually be meaningful livelihoods. And as New York pushes the minimum wage higher and higher, at one hand, we're like, we can't do this. On the other hand, now people can sustain a life with what we're paying. And I think that's also reinforcing this idea that this is one of the sort of necessary parts of being a human on planet Earth, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah. And so also, because you have the farm store on site and then your members come on site, they also can literally see and interact with the fruits of their labor. So even if, as you said, Mark, they're just washing out jars, they then see the happy faces of the people who are walking away with their whatever it is they got in those jars. And I imagine that full circle experience helps them really feel valuable.
And that's the reason that New York City was so challenging, is for many of the farmers and members, there was never a face-to-face or hardly a name. It was the opposite of that. It was a much more transactional, here's this incredible influx of income, here's this incredible product, but devoid of the kind of human connection.
Right. Which I think at the end of the day, for me at least, is such an important motivator for the whole small farm experience. It's about the food, but it's about the people. I mean, there wouldn't be food without the people to feed.
100%.
And that's kind of your marketing energy recently too. I think Kristin has really done a great job of,
well, I think,
walking into that.
For hopefully this speaks to the audience that is listening, but I think as independent farmers, we are at a huge disadvantage against this giant juggernaut of a food system that can always do it cheaper than we can and more massively than we can, and owns the means of distribution, and really has that on lockdown. Those of us who are trying to remain independent, I think what we have going for us is that relationship with our customers, and tending that relationship is real work, just as tending the perennial beds is, because it's what we can. I mean, we obviously, I think that food that we produce is superior to what you're going to get in the industrial food system, but without the relationship between the farmer and the customer, it's really hard for the farmer to capture the value that they need to capture in order to keep the whole thing going. So tending that relationship is farming as much as anything else is.
Yes, 100%. I totally agree. I want to shift a little bit because we've talked a while, and I want to make sure I cover a couple of things. Kristin, you have written 2 amazing memoirs about your farming experience and the farm. I'm curious about how you managed to fit that in, because I just had a book come out, and there's no way I could have written it while we were still full-time farming. Like our farm landscape has shifted. How did you do that? I'm just curious.
I mean, the lovely thing about being married to Mark is that his energy and focus is really incredible. And he was able to give me the space during those years to get the hours at my desk in that I needed to get in order to get those books out. And I didn't carry the same responsibilities then that I do now. So that part of my brain that was creative and in sort of the reporting mode all the time was it just had to be online all the time. So, a lot of people who are farmers also have an off-farm job. And during those years, writing books was my farm-based but separate off-farm job. And I was lucky because A, I loved it. I loved the way that it connected me with other farmers and with readers. And B, it really helped our family achieve security here on the farm. It helped, the sale of those two books really helped us pay for our land and raise our kids when they were little. So it was just really a matter of making that job a high priority.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Easy though. It's really not easy.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially when you had the kids. So, and then what has been the effect on the farm of having those books out there? Because they're very, there's two, there's The Dirty Life and Good Husbandry. If the audience hasn't read them, definitely check them out. They're so engaging. Especially if you're a farmer, you'll recognize so many experiences, but they're very vulnerable books. And so I'm curious, do you have interns who come to you because they read the books? Do you get customers? How has it affected, like the farm keeps going, the books are out there, but you are still a living entity as a farm. What's that been like?
I know. It's the funny thing about a book is that it's an artifact, right? It's like this little piece, a nonfiction book is like this piece of time. And yes, we still get people who come to the farm or are looking for jobs here because they read my books. It's a lovely platform to have to be able to explain to people what we do and why we do it. In fact, our farmer from Germany came here because she was working on a farm in Germany and somebody handed her the book.
A remote dairy in the mountains.
Yeah. And somebody handed her The Dirty Life and she called us up and said, I want to come work on your farm. We're like, oh, okay.
That's cool.
The books still have this lovely ripple effect and have brought people here that otherwise, we would never have encountered. And I didn't know that when I wrote them. I didn't know that would be part of the legacy of those books, but it's been one of the truly richest parts of my life to be able to meet other people who understand because of the book what we're doing and relate to it.
Yeah, so you feel like the books have worked in a way that it feels like people understand what you're doing after they've read them. I don't know. I guess I think because the farm keeps evolving, maybe people come in with assumptions, but it sounds like it's working.
No, that happens often, especially if they just read the first book, which covers our first year of farming here. They have a very different picture in their head when they arrive from what it is now. And anytime you write memoir, you're choosing a very select section of your past and your life to write about. So it's never going to be exactly what they thought it was in their head, but it does bring them here. And I think I always love the emails that I get from people who say, I read your book and I decided to change my life and I started a farm. And I'm really happy now. And I just love knowing that words have power like that in the world.
Yeah. That's sweet. We wrote a letter to Wendell Berry years and years ago telling him something similar, like, hey, we read your books and then we started a farm. And he sent a letter in response and was like, I've heard that happens. It was so funny. He's like, I hope it's working for you.
Yes, exactly. I hope you're happy.
It sounds like you're very busy now with the new management role on the farm, but do you have any writing projects in the works or even just in your head stewing?
I definitely have in my head some pages even, because I really feel that there's a third book in the story of Essex Farm that's asking to be written now. Okay. So I write every day. I keep notes. I make sure that I have a good record of what's going on the farm so that I can use that as raw material at some point. And I'm really looking forward to making that happen.
I look forward to it too, the trilogy.
Yeah. And I want to write about other things, not necessarily Essex Farm, but having these 2 decades in the food system, we just, you know a lot when you're on the ground that I think is worthwhile to share with people who eat food, which is all of us.
Yes.
So there's other projects that I want to write as well.
Okay, good. Well, I look forward to them. And looking to the future for the farm, what sort of long-term challenges are you seeing? And it sounds like you've already done a lot of that thought work with this kind of new development, but are there any challenges we haven't talked about that you're anticipating and trying to take steps to meet?
My job now is part of that question, right? Is that because I'm less in the stressful day-to-day of managing people and place and I'm doing a lot of work in the fields. I do a lot of the sort of haymaking, cover cropping, large scale fencing projects, grant development, and that kind of thing. I've been spending a lot of my time sort of, especially since that transition 3 years ago, because I was starting to think about those things then of sort of what does the next generation look like and what's in everyone's best interest. And I don't think any of us have a clear path. I think being open to the fast changes, not just political, but global, of temperature rising and new types of leadership in this country. And what does that mean for small farms? And how do we bring ourselves together as a community to support and open our hearts, minds, farms to others? And in that context, it's kind of interesting that there are now sort of 10,000 acres of open ground in this woodland area that are no longer really being demanded for any human need, right? The number of animals being fed is going down. The number of people making hay and selling it is going down. And so I'm thinking a little bit along the lines of what does it look like to try to recruit more farmers from this country and other farmers to be in this region? And how would we not compete against each other, but instead work synergistically? What are some of the ways to facilitate that? There's 2 or 3 high-end farms for sale as our neighbors around here that haven't had a buyer in 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of really interesting sort of local agricultural questions that I think your question brings up. And so for our specific farm, right now we're looking at a slow, steady expansion into more and more of the regional food market. I like to think of farming as beyond food. It's sort of all human need that doesn't come from mining. And we actually have a gravel outcrop now that we can make our own roadways from. So I'm always trying to figure out that it took me a while to figure out that food had more to do with life or there was more to food than just vegetables. I think that took me like 10 years to realize that I eat cheese and meat and grains. That took a long time. Now it's like, oh, wait, my clothing, housing, roads, whatever it is, those all require, even moving, transportation, entertainment, all can be connected to agriculture. So looking at how a land base and a community could work together to do those things. And as one example, one of the farmers who farmed here for a couple of years used to be a carrier pilot. And he's gotten into both a low energy kiln drying of local woods and also now shaping those woods into moldings and flooring as an agriculturally adjacent business that seems really local and beautiful. And so I think part of what I'd like for me and Kristin and our team to do is sort of stay open to more facets of agriculture, because I don't think we want to just grow what people call sort of sacrifice zones, where we're just doing tillage for radishes. That integrating more types of agriculture, I think, makes sense. So I'm really open to a lot of those directions right now. And I think listening to the team and seeing as a group of us sort of where to prioritize. And I think Kristin is right to know that all of us who are in the field need to shift our vantage point from crops and rocks and trees to the public, right? The as Kristin calls them, the civilians. And that we really need to not just try to sell civilians products, but also connect with them on a meaningful way to create longevity in our sort of community development. And I think she's really, I think, highlighted for all of us that, yes, it's really important to milk the cows well with our 6-step cleanliness methods, et cetera, but also to remember that milk is going to a household and how do we connect the dots there. And I like that energy. And I think that's a lot of our focus will be shifting our whole team to look outward, not just inward, which I think we did for the first generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that seems like a important vision for everybody in farming, is to be thinking about those kinds of questions and long-term goals.
And of course, horses.
Okay, so after all these years, what still thrills the two of you about farming?
Oh, goodness, so many things. I mean, really, the food is a daily thrill, a daily blessing.
One of her pathologies is pathology. You should talk about your...
Oh, yeah. I have this, Mark and I tend to divide the farm a little bit into our passions, and Mark loves everything here, but soil and plants are kind of his wheelhouse.
And feed.
And the animals and the biology of the animals and what can go right and what can go wrong is my wheelhouse. And this year has been keeping it lively on that front. We've had a really hard year with the sheep flock, which is usually just the absolute pride of the farm.
There are bulletproof sheep.
Yeah. And we've lost about 20% of our flock this year.
Oh.
And we're just getting to the bottom of it. And it's likely climate related because we had these very wet events last summer, and we're about to get confirmation on this, but it looks like our flock was infected by deer fluke, which is carried by snails and is a deer parasite, not a sheep parasite. And when it gets into the sheep, it drags clostridial bacteria with it, and then it just sort of like wanders around mostly the liver of the sheep. And when the clostridial bacteria is in the right environment, it produces this toxin, and you have this like beautiful sheep that was fine yesterday, and now it's dead. So
wow.
you asked me what was great about farming still, and the truth is, like, I really still love the biological puzzle and the complexity of these living systems. A lot of times, it involves you don't always win. But I'm still absolutely fascinated by the web of life and how a shift in something like the rain pattern can have this effect like 6-7 months later that takes some detective work to figure out. So the living systems are still very bright and interesting to me. And of course, the food, that part is just every day's a light.
Yes, the food.
I think for me, it's been interesting. There is something about, seeding down or overseeding legumes and watching how something that I've never really seen in real, like, we all know the word nitrogen, but I really don't know what nitrogen looks like. But the idea that frost seeding clover can lead to 5 years of 3-foot tall legumes that are just out of control, and how that becomes milk and meat and vegetables, grass-fed vegetables. We do a lot of extensive cover cropping, and we move vegetables very far away from each other and into places that have been cover cropped or grazed for 4 or 5 years. The idea of grass-fed animals, grass-fed plants, that definitely is still being part of any of that is great. Even though it sometimes hurts and feels hard, I think being part of the human matrix of like, how do we do this as a team, and where do I fit in and where do you fit in and how do we get along? I still find myself kind of those hard and easy feelings in the community. I love that. And lately, in the last couple of months, I've really found myself returning to middle school roots of when I started becoming a chef and a cook. And I just find myself thinking already of like, we're having snack at distribution again for the first time this year. And I'm sort of cooking for 40 or 50 people to show up on Friday and trying to make a little snack out of this week's food, or something crazy over a bonfire. This week we're going to roast a giant piece of meat. I'm going to slice it and serve it with some roasted parsnips and kale. And like, the fact that I'm having enough space to start getting back into food that way is what wakes me up in the morning. Like, okay, how can I garnish this? Like, who cares about a garnish? And then people come in and they're like, oh, that looks beautiful. So we did carrot juice last week because we have a tremendous, perfect crop of carrots and more than others will eat. We can give a lot to food banks, which we do frequently. Any excesses, we still have that as a great absorber of any excesses, but let's do some carrot juice. So that's certainly been exciting to me. And I think watching our kids push away from and return to the farm is also a huge thrill that, like Kristin was sort of alluding to earlier, the sort of what kids get from and take away and bring back to the farm, even if they're away, is amazing. And I love that both with our kids and other kids in the community. So those are my top 4.
Sounds great. Also making me hungry.
Yes.
It's like not even lunchtime where I am, but I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat. So I want to wrap up, but I know you both give a lot of talks and are very generous with your farming experience and knowledge through the books and through social media at times. And I'm curious, in all those occasions, is there a question that you wish people would ask you, but you've never been asked?
Yes, I got one.
Okay.
It's something like, it's its own answer, but the idea that someone would come to us and somehow have the feeling inside, like, can they find the courage to become a farmer of some sort? Like, it's a very intimate, personal question that I'm not quite able to put into words, but this idea that someone would, as they're walking towards us, would be like, can I do this? And then without us having to answer, have them then say, yes, of course, I can start with something, right? The idea that the transformation within does not need a quote expert from the outside. Some kind of a question like that, that's not even a question of like it's more of a, I'm scared, is this possible? And our very essence of being here with a dozen other farmers has already been answered. I feel like that would be, that just, when that happens, and it maybe doesn't quite happen, but I think it's in everyone to want to be more connected to the ground, and somehow a question around that of like, can I do this, being answered by its own question would be, I would love that.
Okay. What about you, Kristin?
I feel like people have asked such wonderful questions over the years out of true curiosity, out of a sort of, I don't know, cultural memory of agriculture being a part of everybody's life. And there's some question, I feel like as I watch my kids get older and this generation, this younger generation that's grown up with screens, there's something that I wish I could tell them about the satisfaction of an unmediated life, the satisfaction of a life that's lived directly through actions that have really beautiful consequences, and rather than a life that's simulated somehow, or lived through a screen, or mediated that way through something less than real. Because I don't think they will automatically understand the beauty of a life that's lived through action until they experience it. So I wish people would ask about that.
Yeah. I wish young people would ask about that, right? That's a whole nother podcast conversation we need to have someday about the youth and screens. That's a whole nother conversation, but it does seem very, very connected to our work as farmers. So we can be, hopefully, like, I don't know about role models. That doesn't seem like the right word, but maybe a refuge. I don't know, maybe a reminder.
Yeah. And we can offer that experience. You see some people come onto a farm and they touch the dirt for the first time and something shifts in them. So we can offer that experience.
Beautiful. I think that's a perfect note to end on. How can people find you too, or Essex Farm, if they want to connect further, learn more?
We're about to redo our website, so don't laugh at it if you go on there right now. It's EssexFarmCSA.com. And it's going to look a lot better in a few months. And you can always find us on Instagram. Mark has Farmer Kimball, is that it? Farmer Kimball on Instagram. We have Essex Farm CSA on Instagram. You are always welcome to get in touch via email or through the website. And we're always happy to hear from other farmers and hear about what you're doing out there.
And I work best with text, so you can just text me directly at 518-570-6399. And that's worked great. I usually respond pretty quickly.
That was very generous of you to share that, Mark. So enjoy all the questions you get from all the farmers out there.
We've had that number out there in the world for a long time. And people are like, what's it like to be famous? I'm like, it means that one person once a year texts me unknown and says, is the farm store open? So
okay.
We're dealing with the fame and the subsequent income very generously.
So maybe that'll double. You'll get 2 texts a year now. Okay. Well, thank you two so much. It was such a pleasure to connect and hear more about what Essex Farm is doing today and the two of you. And I love how you always bring such thoughtfulness to your work. It's really appreciated.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks
we
so
appreciate
much, Katie.
What you do. And thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and information from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and you haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never get billed. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 per year, You get a year of the magazine, plus over 150 back issues from the last 15 years. Head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers, for farmers, in Growing for Market magazine.